Authorities are now focusing on a surveillance image taken of the suspects just moments before those explosions went off at the airport in Brussels. It shows 3 men suspected of carrying out the attack, 2 of whom are each wearing a black glove on their left hand. You can see that circled right there. Our chief intelligence correspondent, Herridge, brought this to our attention. She's live for us in Washington with more. Catherine, what can you tell us about the manhunt and significantly what you saw in that photo?
Well, thank you, Heather. I want to share with everyone what I've been able to gather with conversations with current counterterrorism sources as well as former law enforcement sources. We'll bring up the picture full screen. Let's start with the guy there on the on the right, in the white. He clearly, based on my conversations, appears to be wearing a disguise. You see the hat, and if you go up real close to his face, it almost looks like he has makeup or even a prosthetic nose. The coloring of the nose is not consistent with the complexion of the rest of the face. It is not uncommon in suicide attacks for there to be an escort for the bombers. This is very typical when women are suicide bombers. We're not dealing with women in this case, but it's the same principle. It's making sure the bombers get to the target. So the individual acts as an escort, has foreknowledge, having cased the area, and gets them to the location. Now let's take a closer look at the guys on the left. This may seem like a strange observation, but look, khakis are very common here in the United States. They are not common in Europe. That would be the clothing of American citizens on those guys. That's what it's meant to look like. Number 2, when you look at the gloved hand, it's clear they're not worried about fingerprints, because if they were concerned about fingerprints, they would have gloves on both hands. You see how the other hand is rested on the, the support for the baggage carrier. There are 2 theories based on my conversations about that one gloved hand. They both relate to some kind of form of detonation. It could be a dead man switch, which is a fancy way of saying that once the pressure of the hand on the trolley bar is lifted, if the individual was shot and collapsed, that sets off the detonation. The second is that you would have live wires inside the gloves, so the act of simply taking the fingers together and touching them would set off the detonation. But this sort of very peculiar use of a single glove, both of them on the same hand, pushing the trolley, is certainly of interest to those who have a lot of experience in counterterrorism as well as law enforcement, Heather.
Catherine, it kind of takes my breath away to think about the world that we're living in now, that we can have this conversation about those very details. I want to ask you about this because ISIS has claimed responsibility for this series of attacks. How credible is that claim?
Well, we don't have as much experience with ISIS as we have with al-Qaeda in the past, but by and large, ISIS does not take responsibility for attacks that it did not have some sort of authorship in. This claim of responsibility comes from one of their news agencies within their propaganda arms. This is a group that's not a household name, but it's been standard practice for this group to draw that direct line between a terrorist attack and ISIS in Raqqa, Syria, almost immediately after major events. They did so after the November attacks in Paris. They praised the attacks in San Bernardino, California, and now today they're taking responsibility for the attacks in Brussels. What's noteworthy in the language is that they talk about suicide bombers and devices. So far that does track with what we're hearing from the Belgian prosecutor, that there were 2 suicide bombers at the airport and perhaps a 3rd on that subway train in Brussels. The big picture here, based on my conversations with contacts who are current and also those who are former intelligence officials today, is that this was not some kind of pickup game that they decided to do over the course of the weekend after Salah Abdeslam was captured on Friday. It more has the feel of a plot that was already in motion, but the timeline was moved up because the capture would have exposed information about other individuals in Brussels, Heather.
Catherine Herridge for us in Washington. Thanks, Catherine.